The NBA Draft is one of the most anticipated events of the offseason every year, because especially for teams near the bottom of the standings that usually own the picks at the top, it offers them a glimmer of hope as they take players that they expect to guide them into the future. The teams with those early picks obviously expect to be the ones selecting the best players, but as we all know, things usually don't play out that way. Every year there are players that outperform their projections, players that underperform at the top, and guys that surprise everyone with their play. And while some teams benefit from these pleasant surprises, there are just as many teams that look back on their pick with regret, which brings us to the topic of today's video. Today, we're going to be looking at 4 teams in particular who, based on how other players they could have selected are performing, along with how the players that they actually selected are performing themselves, might be looking back at the 2020 NBA Draft regretting the selection that they made. This doesn't necessarily mean the players we'll be discussing are going to be busts at all, but better alternatives were definitely on the board. Before we start though, it turns out about 67% of you watching right now aren't even subscribe to the channel, so please, if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but I would also very much appreciate it. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first team that seems to be regretting their selection from the 2020 NBA Draft that we'll be discussing is the Atlanta Hawks, who selected Onyeka Okongwu 6th overall. Now, unlike some of the selections on this list, the regret for this pick doesn't necessarily come from the fact that the player is underperforming or not looking like someone who should have been picked as high as he was, but the regret instead stems from the fact that the fit was always kind of questionable between player and team, and midway through the season, that still very much holds true. The Hawks knew their front court depth was jam-packed before the draft, as players like Clint Capella and John Collins are huge parts of the team's rotation, and then players like Danilo Gallinari and Bruno Fernandes, amongst others, are also fighting for minutes in the rotation as well, combined with the fact that the Hawks also like to run small ball lineups every now and then, and that combination was always going to result in Okongwu's ability to see the floor being limited. I'm still a firm believer in Okongwu as a player, and think the skill set that he brings both as a versatile defender and skillful offensive contributor will work out in the long run, but in order to develop to your fullest, you need minutes, and the Hawks are in a spot where they're gunning for a playoff spot, so they're going to play the guys who are ready now, and with this in mind, targeting a player that could have been more of a contributor this year in a spot they needed would probably be where they go if they had a redo. The next team potentially already regretting the player they selected in the 2020 NBA Draft is the Detroit Pistons, who selected Killian Hayes 7th overall. For this selection, I don't want it to seem like I'm picking on the guy who got injured early on, because injury is definitely not the reason why he's here to be discussed. Hayes suffered a hip injury early in the season and could potentially return to the court in the near future, so when that happens, he definitely could prove me wrong. But going back to the time of the draft, this class had 2 solid point guard prospects projected to be picked in the range that the Pistons were drafting, and if the team was going to go the route of picking a point guard, it appears they selected the wrong one. Tyrese Halliburton has been one of the best rookies in the entire league this year, playing at a level of a veteran from the jump and showing off an advanced ability to make plays for others, play perimeter defense, and score the ball, and most people expected him to be picked in the top 10 at the time as well. When he slipped outside of the top 10, most were shocked, and now he's proving all of the teams that passed on him wrong. So especially for a team that did take a point guard in Hayes in the top 10 like the Pistons did, who before his injury was also struggling, they especially will be regretting passing on Halliburton. The next team potentially regretting their selection from the 2020 NBA Draft is the New York Knicks, who selected Obi Toppin. Toppin was a very exciting prospect at the time of the draft, and I would be lying if I said I wasn't a fan of his at the time who thought he would be successful at the next level. But despite what we all thought of him then, so far through 24 games played for him, he's been struggling, and Knicks fans have been growing frustrated with his his play on the court. One of the things that made Toppin so good at the college level during his Player of the Year campaign last year was that he was a dominant player in the post with his combination of quickness, strength, and touch around the basket. But at the NBA level, the defenders he's facing are now much better in the paint, and he hasn't had nearly as much success in this regard. Additionally, his shot has been much more inconsistent than anticipated, his defense leaves a lot to be desired, and as a result, the minutes he gets out on the floor are equally as inconsistent. The Knicks have been surprising everyone this year, as they currently sit at 5th place in the Eastern Conference standings with a 500 record, and taking a rookie more ready to contribute to help continue this run would probably have been a bit more ideal. Players like Deni Avdija, who was taken 1 pick after him, could have been a play here, and obviously Tyrese Halliburton was still available as well, who absolutely would have fit into the team's backcourt very well. But regardless, Toppin is just unfortunately not coming along as well as anticipated in the Big Apple. And finally, the last team we'll be talking about today that may be regretting the pick that they made in the 2020 NBA draft is the Phoenix Suns, who selected Jalen Smith 10th overall. This was a pick that made a lot of people scratch their heads at the time, and midway through the season, it still isn't exactly looking like the smartest decision the organization has ever made. The Suns have done so many things correctly lately, and they're one of the best teams in the league right now as well, with one of the best records, but drafting still seems to be one of their weaknesses. From Alex Len to Dragan Bender to Josh Jackson and now to Jalen Smith, it's just one thing they seem to consistently mess up, and the reason why I'm not high on this selection, again, is not because of the injury that Smith suffered, because he was struggling prior to it. Smith was someone projected to be taken in the middle of the first round at best by most who follow the draft, so to reach for him in the top 10 was always a risk. For him to be putting up less than 2 points and 1 rebound per game so far, after doing so, makes it look even worse. This draft actually had a lot of talent in the first round, and highly capable players were available all throughout it. So for them to reach for one of the riskiest players when guys like Halliburton, Saddiq Bey, Cole Anthony, and many others were still available leaves a lot to be desired. By no means do I think he'll be a bust though, and his injuries very well could have prevented him from getting comfortable and turning things around, but at the same time, the Suns have continued to trend upward, and the likelihood of him having a consistent role in the rotation was always going to be slim because of their win now mode. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about the players we discussed today and any other rookies who you think the teams might be regretting drafting. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.